Morning. Happy New Year. Today we're going to have a few thoughts on New Year, and I don't exactly know how you're coming to this particular occasion. I think that how we take a look at a New Year has an awful lot to do with how we lived in the old year. Some people, they take a look at the old year and say, good riddance. Good, glad it was over. There are other people who take a look at it and say, you know what, it was a pretty good year. Things went pretty well. How did the year go for you? How did it go as you expected? Did things work out in the way that you imagined? Did we accomplish what we wanted? How did we live it? Do we feel like we were taking swings and curveballs all year? Or does it seem like, there were some nice easy lobs that we were able to handle and hit it out of the park? I was reading on Facebook a friend of mine who's a young guy, and he must have had an absolutely fantastic year. Everything he said was just, wow, it was a great year. Others, not so much. And sometimes I think how we take a look at the new year is, again, dependent on how we take a look at the old year. However, we also recognize that really the transition from one year to another is pretty arbitrary. It's not anything that we can say, okay, well, you know what, this right here is a break. We recognize that as we take a look at New Year's and we look at things like this is a time of reflection for a lot of people as they're trying to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to resolve to do this next year? How am I going to work through this next year? What are my goals for this next year? How am I doing that? But I also think that really in a scriptural way, we keep in mind that every single new day, every single new moment is an opportunity to live like Jesus wants us to live. As Jeremiah says, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases, his mercies never come to an end, and they are new every morning. And so as we approach 2023, as individuals, but also as a church, maybe we need to consider how we can take a look at every single new day, no matter what the day before may have thrown at us, no matter how successful the day may have been before. What can we take with us as we go into 2023? What can we take with us into January 2nd? What can we take with us January 3rd? What can we take with us April 8th? What can we take with us whatever day and say, this is what we're going to do this day? I've been thinking about us as a congregation, as a church, as we go into 2023. And as we think about how this past year has gone, there have been losses, there have been troubles, there have also been times of joy and celebration. But I want us to take a look at some things that maybe we as a church can take to heart and make ours every day of this year for our congregation. And I want us to specifically take a look at Philippians chapter 1. And as we do this, I want us to see what is going on here. And of course, Paul, as he is writing to the various churches, every single letter that he writes to the churches is because there is a situation that is troublesome. And I remember a colleague of mine always saying, thank goodness for troubles in the early church, because otherwise we wouldn't know how to deal with an awful lot of things, because Paul writes some things that are very, very critical for our understanding of how we are to live as a people of God, as the people in the first century were also trying to live that way. And so I want us to take a look at Philippians chapter 1, and I want us to take a look at Paul's prayer to the Philippians, and I want us to make this, in a real sense, our prayer. And Paul says it this way, and this is my prayer, that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight, so that you may be able to test and prove what is best, and may be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God. And my question is, can we hold on to that prayer for ourselves this year? And I think that we can, because of what God has already done for us and shown us that we are truly capable of as the people of God here in this community, in this way. And I want us to take a look at what he is saying here. And again, we need to realize that as Paul is writing to Philippians, these are things that he is specifically saying that he wants them to have. This is what I want from you. And I think that when Paul actually writes these prayers, what he is doing, as we talked about in Ephesians and another place, he is saying, this right here is something that you really do need to work at. And so maybe we can take that to heart and say that we need to work at that too, but I think that in a lot of ways, even if we have been this way, we can still do this, that our love may abound more and more. That it's not just going to stay at one particular point and stagnate, but rather that we can go ahead and build on that. And I love what Paul says later on in even Philippians chapter 3. He says, not that I have already obtained all this, but I press to take hold of that which Christ Jesus took hold of me. And so, as we think about this, let us commit to make sure that our love abounds more and more. That we are involved in each other's lives, that we know how we can serve one another, how we can be the kind of church, the kind of brothers and sisters that actively show our love. And how we interact with one another. But I see this also, too, that we can get our priorities straight. And I think that this is what Paul is getting at in verse 10 when he says, so that you may be able to discern what is best and may be pure and blameless until the day of Christ. That you may be able to discern what is best. That's the part that I want us to latch on there. And as we take a look at Philippians, we can see that there were some certain things that were going on that were tearing that church apart in various ways. We can see that in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, with a couple of ladies named Yodia and Sinski, and how they were not getting along. And Paul, he exhorts that particular church to help them do this. But also what we see in all this letter is that Paul has a specific task in mind that he wants to accomplish. And we talked about it in Bible class today, that really what is most important is the furtherance of the gospel message to the world. That is what we need to be focusing on. And Paul, throughout his entire letter to the Philippians, he talks about, you know what, I'm in prison here. And we can take a look at that and say that's a bad thing. But really, what is happening is people are coming to know Jesus Christ because I am here. They know the reason why I'm here. I'm here because of my chains. I really don't want to spend any of 2023 in prison. That's not my desire. I don't think that is going to be our situation. But can you imagine having the kind of outlook that says, no matter what happens, what's most important is that the gospel message is getting preached. And so as we take a look at our discernment and our being able to set our priorities straight, I think in part what Paul is doing there is he's taking a look at these relationships here, and he says, you know, you're focusing on some things that you shouldn't focus on. Well, I want you to be able to focus on what's most important. And if that love is something that is most important, then get that. If that fellowship with the Spirit is something that is most important, get that. If there is tenderness and compassion, get that. If there is encouragement from being united with Christ, get that. We get that in Philippians chapter 2. And so, as a congregation, let us make sure that we get our priorities straight. Let's not get distracted by things that are off track, but set our priorities completely straight. And finally, what Paul is talking about, he says, and that you may be pure and blameless until the day of Christ. And I think that what he is saying here, I think very, in a focused way. He is saying, make sure that you are living in a way that if Christ comes this very second, you can say, I'm ready. You don't have anything to fear when that trumpet sounds. And we see this all throughout Philippians where he says, work out your salvation with fear and trembling in chapter 2. We see this. And so what we need to be doing is we need to make sure that we are living in a way that when Jesus comes again, we have absolutely nothing to fear. And I think about that in terms of all sorts of things. We can think about it in terms of holiness. We can think about it in terms of of the way that we conduct ourselves in our daily lives, but we can also look at that as how we function together. Do we have that love for one another? Are we discerning what is best? Are we doing all of that? But I think that the other thing that we see in all of this, I think that these three things are what he is really talking about. Committing to a love that abounds more and more. Getting our priorities straight. Discerning what is best is that getting the priorities straight. And then finally living in expectation of Jesus' return. But I think what we also see scattered throughout this prayer and intertwined in this prayer is the how. How we are to do that. And I love that your love may abound more and more in knowledge and depth of insight. And as I take a look at this knowledge and this depth of insight, what I'm seeing here is being able to understand what God's will is, being able to discern, being able to have that love, being able to set priorities straight, and all of this. It's going to take some work. It's going to take making sure that we are transformed by the power of the Spirit in the Word and the prompting of the Spirit and how He leads us in these ways. If you go through the year without opening this book, I don't think that we can possibly hope to love each other as we need to love and to discern what is most important. And we certainly would have a problem living pure and blameless on the day of Christ's return. I think that it is also interesting here that Paul begins this letter really in a prayerful way. We see this even in verse 3. I thank my God every time I remember you in all my prayers for all of you. I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. We see this. And I think also what we need to see here is even though he is not saying that what you need to be doing is praying, we understand that as people of God, we need to be spending time in prayer. Do we have troubles? Do we have times of doubt? Do we have times when things are difficult? Are we taking that to God in prayer? Do we have concerns about the future? Do we have concerns about our future as individuals? Do we have concerns about our future as a church? We need to be bathing our lives in prayer. And I believe that what Paul is saying here is if we commit to these types of things, not only in the beginning of the year of 2023, but every single day as we wake up, every single moment that we are faced with difficulty and joy, that our love will, in fact, abound more and more, that we will be able to discern what is best, and that we will live pure and blameless until Jesus comes again. Today we're about to have a baptism, and that's an exciting way to start a new year. But if anyone else out there has any desire to commit themselves fully to Jesus Christ, we offer an invitation not just this day, but every Lord's Day. And if on another day you decide that this is the day that you are resolving to follow Jesus and it's not on a Sunday, we will make sure that you can follow through with that resolution on any day that it is. But if this is the day that you have made that decision, please come.